what if I'm just this child star? And they like burst out laughing. They're like, Carly, nobody knows who you are.
Evening everyone, Greg here, bringing you the second episode in this brand new series. Thanks for all your kind comments about the podcast kicking off again. We started major with Kevin Parker from Tame Impala last week, and we're staying major for tonight's guest, Carly Rae Jepsen. We'll get into the chat in just a moment, but the past decade, well, more than the past decade, has been quite a ride for the Canadian artist. I'm massively skimming over this quickly, but from appearing on Canadian Idol back in the early days to the release of Call Me Maybe, you'll definitely know that one, a worldwide #1, to collaborating with Justin Bieber, all the way through to Jack Antonoff. And then Emotion, the album released in summer 2015, hugely critically acclaimed, an amazing record. It ended up on a bunch of the recent Best of the Decade lists in some very notable places. And then on to Dedicated, her fourth album, which was out last year, 2019. She followed that up with a huge headline tour. As for myself, I had a total moment watching Carly for the first time at a festival last summer, as you're about to hear. I met up with Carly in London in February, just before Valentine's Day. That's relevant because she was just about to share her latest single, Let's Be Friends, a sort of anti-Valentine's Day anthem, as she puts it. At that point, she was partway through a bunch of shows happening throughout Europe. And loads of topics covered. We talked about her position as an artist who brings together fans of all types of music, how she whittles 200 odd songs that she writes down to a dozen or so for each new project she releases. And we talked about her parallel work in musical theatre. She starred in Cinderella and in Grease in the past, and maybe she'll write her own, who knows? Interesting to hear her talk about her plans on that. So here it is. This is Carly Rae Jepsen on episode 87 of Midnight Chats. And remember, if you like what you hear, do subscribe wherever you're listening to this. And if you do want to support the podcast, we also make a monthly independent music magazine. It's called Loud and Quiet, and you can subscribe to that. Head to loudandquiet.com/subscribe if that sounds like your kind of thing. We ship worldwide, and supporting that helps us make this podcast. Carly, welcome to Midnight Chats. It's a pleasure to have you on our podcast.
It is my pleasure. Thank you so much.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm a little jet lagged, but that's not unusual for me.
How have you found any tricks to sort of cope with that over the years? Because obviously you've kind of been crisscrossing the world, doing touring and everything else. So are there any little hints or things that have picked up along the way that just help you ever overcome that? Or is it just no, you just succumb to the jet lag?
Yeah, no, me and sleep just aren't friends lately. I don't know what to tell you. I have tried them. I've read books on it. What are some sleep tricks? Apparently you have to have the right temperature in the room. It's good to have a shower, not too hot of a shower. I've tried it all.
Don't read
I
your
just
phone.
come to terms with the fact that I'm a little bit of an insomniac.
Aren't there tips along the lines of what to do when you're actually flying? Don't eat meals when you're flying in the air, and then when you get to the place where you're going, you should automatically try and sort of fit into the, say if you land at breakfast, the first thing you should have is breakfast, and then try and resume your routine or whatever.
There are tricks to that. I think my theory on the travel side of the eating, sleeping stuff, because of the insomnia sometimes, is just sleep when you can, eat when you're hungry.
Yeah. Keep it simple.
Try to get on board for the city that you're in as soon as you can. Acclimate yourself, great. But you know what? It's never unmanageable. I think the worst I can go is 3 days where I'm having trouble sleeping in a row. And then the worst case scenario is that I get really giggly. Or you might say something that I think is going to make me cry.
Yeah, that's it.
It's one emotion or the other.
It's certain to happen. And also it happens whilst you're traveling as well. I think Paddington 2 had me in floods of tears.
Oh, you can't watch emo movies or cute ones. No dead dogs.
No, exactly. It had me absolutely ruined.
Stay away from all of the above.
yeah, exactly. Just stick with a kind of just a Marvel action film. Just let's keep things, relatively
a period
steady.
Piece,
exactly.
Something like that.
Nothing that's not going to take you on too much of an emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to start this podcast by taking it back to a particularly joyful moment for me, which came at the start of last summer. I was at the Primavera Sound Festival in Barcelona.
Oh, wow. I was there too.
You were there too. And I was with a group of friends. We were watching you play. That was the first time I've ever seen you play live. It was just a particularly amazing moment for that weekend, because for people that haven't visited that festival, it's kind of held on the outskirts of Barcelona. On one side of the stage, you've got the sort of Barcelona skyline, and on the other you've got the Mediterranean Sea. It's very idyllic. You know, when you go to a festival and there's usually kind of one moment that just becomes like this indelible thing that you all kind of talk about for ages and months afterwards, and it was your set at Primavera Sound last year.
Really? Thank you.
Do you remember that show? Was it a memorable one?
Yeah, I remember that show for lots of reasons. I feel like we had an incredible time in Barcelona to begin with, and then getting to arrive at that stage, like you said, that venue, if you can call it a venue, it's just like outdoor, and you can see sort of, from my perspective, just seeing this crowd of people and the ocean and the sunset. It was just like a very, very, very magical day. And on top of it, they gave me free sunglasses, so I'm pretty stoked.
You're like, I'm going to come back and do this festival. Yeah, it was just sort of like the perfect moment, because it was at sunset, I recall, and so like the first half of the set was in daylight, and then the kind of sun came down. What was going through your mind when you're on stage? Are you just in the moment? Like, does your mind go blank, or do you have things running through your mind?
Oh, good question. I don't know if it's the exact same formula for every show, but in this particular one, if I'm jogging my memory right, I just remember it being really one of those sort of like pinch yourself moments, because I mean, as much as I've performed in Barcelona before, I hadn't really done a festival of this nature, and I feel like I still have those like insecurities right before you go on stage of like, is anyone going to be digging in any of this? Like, I don't know. So to kind of get to perform to a crowd and to see everyone kind of dancing and singing along, that blew my mind. And then I think I just got to enjoy the euphoria of the moment. You
kind of reference it there, that a festival like Primavera Sound, like going back a few years, would have been considered like a kind of alt rock festival. That would have been the sort of stuff that they booked. They're a lot more diverse now. But there was a beautiful moment during your set where I turned around, and not that I have a kind of tight cast view of what a Carly Rae Jepsen fan necessarily looks like, but there was a guy wearing a Slayer t-shirt who was absolutely going nuts. And I just thought, this is perfect. Over the years, have you noticed the type of people that come to your shows, or the type of people that you see out there enjoying your music? Has that evolved? Has that changed in any way?
Strangely enough, if I were to say like one sort of description, is it's always just been beautifully diverse. Like when somebody's asked me like, what is your fan base? Like, what is it this age? Is it, it's kind of just, it's always surprised me that I don't know how to answer that. And I think that's what I really have found I love about kind of getting to perform to these crowds, is you feel like none of these people might have come together otherwise. So I just get to be kind of like, I don't know, the conductor of the thing in a fun way. And it becomes a party, which I never thought I would be able to be in this position to say, but it's the kind of the energy of the room sometimes just like takes over in a way that I love, and I'm just kind of caught up in.
There aren't many artists that I can think of that could go from playing Primavera Sound to, I don't know, playing like I could easily see you playing like Manchester or Brighton Pride or something like that, like the next day. Do you know what I mean? It's just, yeah, it's diverse. There are not many artists that can do that. So how do you feel about that position of being able to adopt these different, not tribes, because people, like I say, I think it feels a lot more diverse these days, and people are a little bit less tribalistic about the music that they like, but you can slot into these different modes almost, can't you?
I think at some point, like the main goal for me was about really embracing what it was that I loved about pop. Because whenever people said pop in the past, there was always like hand in hand with that saying guilty pleasure. And I'm like, if it actually makes you feel happy, why you feel weird about it? Like, where is the guilt coming from? I think there's something that I like, that I find kind of feeds my soul about it. It's a really communal kind of form of music. So yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question right, but I think when I'm getting to kind of jump from like one room to a different room, and it feels like the people who are just have embraced the pop that they love, and that I get to be a part of that, and that makes me very, very lucky. Yeah.
That evening as well, I've seen something at a gig that I've never seen before, probably will never see since. And somebody in the crowd was waving like a French baguette in the sky, and I was rewatching the clip recently, and I thought, that's a French baguette somebody's waving in the crowd. I thought, of all the things that you've never seen somebody at a festival with, like, yes, like flags, yes, inflatable swords, like everything, like and I just thought, well, I don't know.
I don't know about
Did that have any significance, the baguette?
I have missed the baguette. I wish I hadn't. I love random weird shit like that. But I feel like there's been so many laughs along this journey, just with like the fans are so inventive and really engaged, and from memes to just like the sword thing you mentioned, it feels like every couple weeks there's a new thing that has me in the band boys just like chuckling of like, this is so bizarre and I love it. And it makes you have to smile.
Have you ever been handed anything else on stage where you've just been like, oh, I'm surprised you've given me that, but thanks very much?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I've been given like ladies' bras before, which is always a little bit like, isn't that like more like for like rock stars? But like, sure, I'll take it. It's a double D. Not gonna fit me, but thank you. Sometimes people like we've had some strange ones. Sometimes in the middle of the show, people will like hand you their phone because they want you to like take the selfie. That's not, I guess, that unusual. But yeah, I think I had one guy hand me his CD demo.
Oh, really?
Like, will you take a listen
what
later?
What an opportunist.
I was like, this is my show. Settle down. No.
The ending to that story is, I listened to it, I thought it was great, we signed him, and now he's...
he's exactly. That's how that story's supposed to go.
Exactly. Is there anywhere that you've ever played where you kind of thought, oh, no, this isn't like, I'm the sort of wrong fit for this moment, or I just feel like out of step with what's going on? Does that happen as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that happened recently at a festival. I'm trying to picture where it was exactly. But it was a festival and it was like midday and it was a lot of college students and they had done a ton of drugs and they were mosh pitting. And I was looking at my team like, how are they going to digest this? Like, how are they going to digest my music right now? Like, I feel like they want something completely different. And they're like, well, like, just give it a go. I was like, all right, guys. I'm like, we're just gonna pretend like they love it, even if they don't. Let's go. And sure enough, we ran out there, and they like were so out of it that they just embraced anything you gave them. Thank God. But it was still like a moment of like, I'm pretty sure one of us is not like the others right now. Like, they were just having a way too good of a time.
Were there like circle pits during your set? Were like people?
Yeah, and they were doing, I don't know what it is, where you like spin and start. I'm an old lady,
like a Slipknot gig.
Yeah, it was like like if you were to put the camera on the audience and to guess who is playing right now, no one would have panned left to me. No one. And yet there we were singing I Really Like You, and they were moshing hard.
Quite like this. I feel like this should have been a viral video. Maybe it's going to be online.
We
somewhere,
had some laughs afterwards for sure.
Yeah, and just glad that like nothing just landed on stage. Like that doesn't seem to be a thing anymore. Like when I first started going to festivals when I was like a teenager, like if there was somebody booked to play a festival, that festivals were much less diverse then. It was like, you know, you were going to a rock festival or you were going to a metal festival. I don't know what your first experiences of going to festivals was like, but that felt like it had like one type of music. I don't think it really happens like that anymore, or not so much at least. Some poor artists, certainly that I've been in the crowd for, that have taken, you know, all sorts of stuff has landed on stage.
No.
Yeah.
Oh.
There are like particularly famous incidents that like particularly like the Reading Festival in the UK has had that a few times. And yeah, people getting like pretty unpleasant stuff thrown at them. But I'm glad to say that I don't think that really happens anymore. So
like the old school like tomato? No, I hope not.
Worse than a tomato. Definitely.
Oh, I don't want to know.
Like
I actually do want to know. You have to tell me now.
Well, just like bottles of unidentified liquid, should we say?
Ew.
And like deck chairs. I've seen a deck chair land on stage with at Reading Festival. Somebody threw like anything that you would go camping with that you could maybe take into the arena, and then when the band is playing or the artist is playing, that
like try to take them out.
Pretty much, yeah. There's one particularly famous example of an artist called Daphne and Celeste, who were a pop duo, British, who played the Reading Festival in like the early 2000s, and they were on a bill with Rage Against the Machine and Blink-182, and I think maybe Slipknot were headlining that night, and they performed this set as kind of a dare because they were like, no, we'll do this, and like then the audience took that as a challenge and they ended up throwing stuff at them, and there's a really famous footage of this show.
Wow.
But I totally stand by Daphne and Celeste for turning up and doing the gig, and being there and doing it. And
I would
why
show
not?
up with one of those, like, you know, those like police screen guards, and I would just like sing the whole thing from behind there, just looking, you know.
What you need is like one of those perspex screens they put in front of the drum kit, but just like a really big one. So when they throw anything, it just
Yeah,
bounces
it can
back
become
off.
like modern art. You can just have like this splash of.
I'm quite into that. It's a video idea.
Yeah, it's a video idea right there.
Definitely. So we'll talk a little bit in a minute about the new music that you've got out and also the European tour and your plans for 2020. But before we do that, I'm interested to know, like, talked a bit about Primavera in 2019. As like that decade came to an end, did you take a bit of a reflective moment to think about everything that had happened that decade, because it was quite a roller coaster for you?
Yeah, I think we must all be kind of doing that, right? I don't know if this is like a New Year's that seems bigger than the rest of the ones in my life, but it's really been like an awakening one of just like, holy shit, time flies. And it's been wild. And I even think with like the kind of Instagram all of a sudden being in your world, you can sometimes scroll back and be like, I'm forgetting half the things that I did, and the pace of stuff is so crazy. But I'm really proud of where we've landed. I mean that for my whole team, not just for myself. It's just been such a journey and so many lessons, and kind of in my own kind of personal life, just so many just different experiences that have led me to, I think, a stronger place and a more confident place than I've ever been before. And in turn, I feel like I'm more excited than I've been maybe ever to just kind of take a sigh of relief. I feel like I've landed my feet on some solid ground, and now let's create without the pressure or the panic or the what happens if I can't stay clawed to this thing.
Did you just take a kind of deep breath? Was it quite as literal as like New Year's Eve? You're just like, wow, okay, just having a quick. No, it was drunk. I was drunk and I was dancing on New Year's Eve.
I was
wasn't
in
thinking-
Mexico on New Year's Eve.
Oh, were you? Oh, so okay. I'm
Yeah.
imagining like tequila in hand,
No.
taco in one hand, tequila.
That's a beautiful thought. No, we did have a lovely New Year's Eve, actually. My family and I, we all kind of, we made the most of it. We went on the rooftop at night. It was great. But no, to answer your question, it's been more of a gradual reflection over the last kind of, I think over this past month of just like, I think I have like a couple of changes as in like new management team, kind of clearing the decks for this album and getting ready for like what's next musically, and kind of rethinking how I've released stuff. And just even within my personal life, my family, it just feels like we've all kind of had a good reconnect over Christmas. So it's just kind of that fresh energy to like, okay, let's go take on our worlds, you know?
Staying on that point of the end of 2019, lots of different places published their like best of the decade albums and tracks and everything else. And Emotion appeared in quite a few of those. I noticed that Time magazine put Emotion in their top 10 best albums of the 2010s.
Wow.
And so Emotion seemed to be one of those albums that exited that decade as really being considered something that encapsulated that period in music. That's the resonance that people were giving it. So how did you feel about that?
I don't know. Even hearing you say that, I still feel like, really? Wow, oh, that's amazing. It's tricky for me because it's a fine balance to walk of really wanting of that sentence that you just said, feeling really good, and that's so nice. But that can't ever be like the full motivation in my mind. Otherwise, you start like creating for the wrong reason. So I think even before anyone had heard Emotion, I had to kind of figure out how I felt about it and let that be the truth. And it landed for me as just something really honest that I felt passionate about, and I was really proud of it and happy to share it. But I felt like whatever happens now could go either way, and I don't know. I just don't want to feel like it couldn't have gone the other way, and that would have changed my feeling of it. So I don't know if that's a proper answer.
If I was you, I'd be printing out those web pages and everything else, and I'd be like turning it into like customized wallpaper and putting it.
I always actually try not to read stuff. But there's moments where you get like a weak moment, and you're like, oh, but it'll get fueled through like filters where Laura will kind of let me know, hey, are you ready to kind of see what the year? I'm like, I don't know, am I? But my mom is cute. She'll send me stuff, and I keep on being like, Mom, I don't want to read this. I'm sorry, but she's a really good filter system because she'll only send like the really good stuff. So it's like,
and in the meantime, she's just like emailing like journalists who've written anything negative, just being like, you guys suck.
Yeah, that's probably my mom right there.
That's the thing though. That's what, hey,
Yeah.
mums have got your back. That's the whole point of good
They
mums,
make
isn't
great
it?
publicists, who knows?
Exactly.
Or
Hey.
terrible ones, let's be honest.
Hey, could you imagine working day to day with actually having like a member of your family in the team?
No, I can't. I cannot.
I mean, in terms of just your formative stages of getting into music and writing your first songs, in my preparations for the research of just looking at stuff for today, I came across a couple of things, a couple of early stories, which I wanted to ask about. One of them was that you wrote your first song when you were age 9. Is that right? And it was called "They're Cutting Down the Big Trees," or was that
Like
roughly
8
around
or
that
9,
time?
yeah, around that time, yeah. It's a protest song.
I mean, you were like, hang on, you were like 25, 30 years ahead of just of like the climate crisis. You were out there making important statements.
I grew up in Canada, in Mission, BC, and my mom was quite, in the most beautiful sense of the word, sort of a hippie, and like was really talking to me about some of these events. And I think my aunt has been famously known for like chaining herself like naked to a tree that they were like.
Wow, so she was an activist.
Well, more so my aunt, but my mom was kind of just informing me about things. And there was this opportunity to like print a poem in this local paper, and I wrote a song. I think I had some help with like figuring out the chords to it from a guy named David, and but I wrote all the lyrics. It was a very emo song about how the trees were all gonna go and how I'm just a child and everyone has to help me fight this kind of thing.
It's very prophetic because, like, I mean,
it's a terrible song. The message is great, but the song is bad. Don't get too excited.
Is it locked in a safe somewhere?
Oh,
or?
yeah.
Is that something still that kind of, given that the climate crisis and how it's kind of rightfully kind of dominating the agenda and national conversation now, something you feel passionate about?
I absolutely am passionate about it. I think when I look to my music, though, I found a real escapism in sort of fantasticalizing sort of my feelings about the things that are a little bit more cut and dry versus like the world issues. But it doesn't mean that that's not down the line for me in some ways. In fact, I can remember calling Tavish Crow, my guitarist, late one night being like, what if we did an entire album not about love? Like, what a challenge that would be. Do you think that's something we could take on together? And he's like, yeah, good luck. Go for it. And sure enough, I picked up my guitar like all mad at him that night being like, watch this. And like, and I started a song about something completely different. And by the end of it, it was just like all sucker feelings. So I was just like, they keep pulling me back. But no, I hear what you're saying. It is something that it's not important in my life. And in my family's world as well, and we definitely are doing what we can. But it's important to realize that that's something that I could maybe be brave enough to take a stab at in music too.
It's also important to acknowledge that some people get criticised for kind of not, say, having a political view in their art when maybe that's just not the stuff that they want to be doing or that they're not naturally inclined to do. Doesn't mean they don't care about those things.
Exactly.
The other story that I was going to ask about was just about how still at that very young age, you wanted to see success for yourself in the future, and did you write a contract to your parents saying that you were going to hopefully one day buy them a house by the sea or something like that?
My mom and my stepdad, yeah. I did. I said that I was going to one day help them. Well, I think when I was little, I said I was going to buy them a house, a cabin. It was a joke. My mom was making me. I was saying that I was going to do all stuff, and I was little. And she's like, "Well, write it on paper." It was wonderful later in life to be able to help in any small way. But they do have that. They've retired now. They live by the ocean in Comox, and they're happier than I've ever seen two people be. So it's just been wild the way life has turned out, and those are the moments that you kind of just pinch yourself, right?
Ultimate gift in a way, isn't it, to be able to
help out your family in any way. Yeah. And I mean, my family's all doing really great on their own anyways. They're very accomplished people, and I am very family rich. I've come from a great bunch of them, and we're big, we're mighty. But you're right. Anytime that there's like a little loving to be dished out in some way, and it can make a difference, it really I mean, what else is it for?
I'm imagining that contract up on the wall, up on the wall with like Carly, age 9.
Yeah, they should have framed it. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. To bring things up to the present, you recently shared Let's Be Friends, which is a new track.
Yes.
Was that track part of the writing session, part of the kind of similar era to Dedicated that you released in 2019? And just tell me a little bit of the background around that.
Yes, it was. And it was a close cut from making it on the album, but I wasn't quite sure yet. It's such like almost like a bratty song, and I kind of felt like I had that with Want You in My Room already, so I was kind of picky and choosy about it. But with Valentine's Day around the corner, I made sense in my mind, like, oh my gosh, this is the song. Laura and me started talking about it just because I classically, historically have a horrible time on Valentine's Day. I think a lot of people do. It's this great expectation. So I loved the concept of having like an Valentine's Day song of just like, for those who actually are suffering, this one's for you. And I also loved the concept of, it's usually the idea that there's a breaker offer and the breakee and like who is going to be the one that's heartbroken. But sometimes it's like both of you just know it's not clicking. And how great to be able to have an adult enough conversation to be like, let's call it, let's have a friendship. Only the fact that the lie that we all as society tell each other to like soften that blow is that this friendship will continue. But of course it never does. So I enjoyed the idea of just being able to put it on out there of like, let's be friends and never speak again, because that's what's going to really happen here.
Yeah, Valentine's Day, the pressure of it just makes me...
I know. And I would love to say that I'm one of those women who doesn't have that pressure, because it's like this Hallmark thing and it's this extra with, but then you see all the people around you being showered with it. And then there's this other feeling of like, ugh, don't do anything. But then, oh, you got me roses, red roses. You think I'm a red roses girl? That's just so typical. And it's like everyone likes, I'm a more unique flower. Like girls are crazy. So are men. But there's no winning on that day.
Have you ever been in a restaurant on Valentine's Day where it's just like exclusively couples all trying to do the same like Valentine's
I know,
thing?
that's just gross, right?
It's so awkward.
It's such a show of love in such a phony manner. But I mean, for the real romantics out there who have planned this and love this day, I'm not knocking it. It's just, it sounds like you and me are on the same path, that it's not been working for us.
Yeah, we should say that anybody who did celebrate Valentine's Day, we hope you had a really, really great time.
We hope you got some red roses.
Yeah, exactly. And not all the other cliched stuff that you were hoping for. You're a notoriously prolific writer. You write a lot of songs. In the run-up to Emotion, how many songs was it? And then in the run-up to Dedicated, I mean, it was like hundreds of songs, right?
Yeah, it was about 200 both rounds.
Okay. So that means that somewhere there's about 380 Carly Rae Jepsen songs that have never been heard by
I think
anybody.
about that a lot. It makes me sad.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, tell me a bit about that. Like those songs they're there, they've been kind of demoed perhaps, or like
fully produced, some of them, sometimes multiple versions, sometimes multiple vocal cuts. Yeah, I workshopped a lot of them simultaneously until it gets to a place where I feel like I can definitely make a vote and that other people can have an opinion. But some of them are like full on done. Like I think I have this poster up in my house and it says, I think too much. And it came after I bought it off this artist after the song Too Much came out that I met in Amsterdam. And it's true. I really do love the process of songwriting. So that makes it really easy to really delve in and dive and want to travel to the places and meet that one person that I felt like I would connect with, because the production was perfect for what I was trying to make. And that took me down a spiral of just both times just having such a collection of material, and so much of it was experimental that it went to that side, and then the other side was just the cream started to float to the top, and I started to have a bit of an image of what I was making. And honestly, I wish I was one of those writers that could just go in, write 8 songs and be like, here you go, and hand it in. But I've learned to not judge my process, because in all of the travel and in all of the sessions, I always feel like I'm becoming a better writer, because I'm taking away from even how other people look at music, and even trying on when you're not in that prolific place of like, what resources can I use here to like figure out what this melody needs or what's wrong with this song. I think it's a great passion of mine, and as you can see, I can talk tirelessly about it. And I just, whether that makes me nuts, I don't know.
I don't know if you're familiar with her work, but we had an artist called Kate Tempest on the podcast not too long ago, and we were talking about a similar thing. And her viewpoint on it was that she writes a lot of songs when it comes to creating a new body of work, but if it doesn't make the final cut, if it doesn't make those final 10 or 12 tracks, even though those pieces of art have been made, she'll never release them, because looking back, she's always basically trying to capture whatever's going on in her mind right then. So if she then goes to make a new album in sort of 2 or 3 years time, she's thinking, I just need to concentrate on writing something that I feel now, and I don't want to kind of pull something from the archive of, I don't know, 10 years ago to put on it. Her point was that maybe it would feel a bit out of context.
I felt that way with the B-sides of Emotion. Like the night before I was going to print, or whatever you want to call it, I remember calling John Eamon, my A&R at the time, and saying, abort mission, like I can't do it. The songs had been so stale in my mind, and I'd been living with them for so long, and I was just really terrified of doing anything that was like less than my absolute best, and these felt like a different period of my life. And he was like, please, Carly, we've done so much work. We've mixed them. You've spent forever on this artwork. Like, please trust me, it will be okay. And it's B-sides. Like, no one's expecting. And I was like, okay. And then I did it, and I was so glad I did. And I realized I had this real great, like, intense sort of anxiety, fear about sharing something that wasn't exactly everything I might have wanted it to be. And in making the dedicated album, already from the beginning, I was hoping that I would be able to have a B-sides eventually down the road too. So I feel like the B-sides this time that I'll be hopefully one day sharing, I love it equally to the first one. I love it because I've given it the same value, knowing that it was going to maybe be coming. So it's almost like a side B rather than a side two rather than like a B-sides. And I'm not so scared to share them. If anything, I have the opposite feeling to her of like, I will be gutted if I don't get to give these babies some life.
From what you've described, and like the idea that maybe sometimes you're not that decisive or find it difficult to be decisive, is that the most painful part of the process, given that, like you said, you write and you record such a volume of material, and then it's like, okay, due to the format, like I'm going to have to basically choose the 12 or the 14 or for each individual project.
Yeah, I have a hard time with that. Like, not hard where I'm like tormented in the night not sleeping over that. It's more that I really go around in circles on it, and I look at it from different angles, and I ask a lot of people, which kind of messes me up too, because everyone has different bloody opinions. But I think even from that process, there's like a little mad science to the fact that the same 6 to 8 start to show themselves with people who are really different in their styles of music, and that was really helpful for me. I kind of like secretly use them as my A&Rs to be like, oh my gosh, my stepmother, who's like only into like Tina Turner and stuff, is into the same song that like my hipster bass player loves. Like, that's telling to me, let's pay attention.
Audience research.
It helps when I think I'm overthinking it.
Yeah, it must be really overwhelming, definitely, at that point in the process. To talk about next steps, we talked about a little bit about new music, but in the past, what you've done, like when you've made a new record and you've gone and you've played shows and you've toured, and you've also deliberately done other projects in between. People know your work in kind of musical theatre. Like, you started on Broadway in Cinderella a few years ago. You did the Grease Live production in 2016. First off, before we talk a little bit about that, your love of musical theatre, that goes back a long time to school days, right?
Yes.
Is that where that all started?
Yes. I grew up in Mission, BC, where there was a beautiful theater built attached to one of the high schools. So I was attending a different high school actually at the time, and they were the school with the theater was putting on a production of Annie, and this was in my grade 8 year. I went and auditioned, even though I didn't belong to the school. And I got it, and I was so stoked. I was so hyped, but it meant that I had to like kind of be going from one school to the other. And I can remember on the night of closing night of Annie, I was crying to my parents, and I was like, what if I'm just this child star? And they like burst out laughing. They're like, Carly, nobody knows who you are. And like it was a high school production of Annie. I thought it was like the peak of my life, and maybe it was. But I fell really in love with how comfortable I felt being on stage, which surprised everyone, and me the most of all, because my father loves music. All my family are very musical, but they're all a little like stage fright is a real thing for us. So yeah, I actually instead I felt a real confidence that I might not have anywhere else in my life as soon as I hit the stage.
And which are you more relaxed with when you go on tour now? Say you take, for example, the European tour, you'll be playing shows pretty much consecutive in different cities, but for say 2 or 3 weeks. Performing on Broadway, you're in the same theatre and you're doing maybe like a 3-month run, and it's 7 shows a week or something like that, or 6-7 shows a week, like matinees and everything else. How do you feel about those two different disciplines of performance? Like, what's
Very
the difference?
different, very different. Well, I think I learned when I finally did the Broadway situation, I fell in love with that too. It was obviously a big upgrade from the High School Musicals. There were a whole bunch of different rules and a different world to learn, but I was craving that at the time because I had just come from like a whirlwind of being catapulted into this like kind of fame game all of a sudden, and then I knew I wanted to kind of like pop that LA bubble, check my head, like figure out what else I could kind of entertain myself with for a second, while I kind of also needed a break from fixating on like radio, and that's it. And so when this opportunity came around, I jumped at it, and I just fell into the world of like all these new rules, these wonderful new people who thank God embraced me, wanted to like teach me the ways, and I loved it. I think they were smart though, because they asked me on the like second month they're in, or like, hey, you want to extend? And I was like, yes. And then of course by like month 5, you're sort of like, this is so repetitive. I can't. It was good because it meant that I was ready and refreshed to go back out into my own show, where the spontaneity is just like so alive, and I have all the rules, and I run the show of like what I wear, what I say, what I change. I'm not going to do this song today. Going to talk over here. With Broadway, it's all about blocking. So you have to hit that note on that moment, on that X, when the light goes like this. And as soon as you kind of feel like you don't have anything else to perfect, or you've gone as far as you can take it, it can become, at least for me, a little bit repetitious and mundane. So I had to always be looking at how I could improve it to stay really present, because if I ever started to feel satisfied or something like that, then I was just kind of like too much like clockwork and not fair to the audience that came.
Having played Annie at school, and played Cinderella on Broadway, and played Frenchie in Grease,
Yes.
what other dream roles are out there if you were to do something like that again? Would you do something like that again? Or do you feel like is that a box ticked, or do you think, no, I'd be interested in doing that again if the right thing came along?
It depends. I mean, I think I don't want to say never. I really feel like it was something that was a bucket list for me, and that I did get the full blown New York experience of Broadway, which like I can't believe I'm even saying that to you right now. That's crazy. That's it's just as equal of a dream to me as any sort of other thing that I've done. But I think I'd be more interested in actually. This is like 5-year down the road plan, but of being involved in like the writing of a pop musical, or being one of the musical aspects of that team, just because I think I've learned so much from my own songwriting that I've done, but I have such a history of like loving and watching and even being in musicals, not just Annie, but like throughout high school. It was like Dorothy and the Wiz. Like it's been a big part of who I am, that I would love to look at storytelling and get to bring it into the world of music that I'm passionate about making.
The world of theatre, I mean, I can only really speak for, say, like London's West End, but it feels like the same shows have been around for a long time. And so every couple of years something comes along that's brand new, like written originally. Do you think you would like want to do something from scratch with its own narrative, or would you adapt like a well-known story? What would you think you'd be in favour of?
We've been having those exact conversations like recently with our team, and I think I almost don't want to speak too much on it, because it's like, don't talk about the thing that you haven't done yet. Like it's just a kind of dreaming out loud, but knowing that this is sort of one of those things that maybe you bring it into fruition by putting it out there, and just start the conversations. I don't have all the answers to those questions yet, though.
Fortunately, Andrew Lloyd Webber is a regular listener to this podcast, so it will be absolutely fine.
See, there you go. Perfect. All my dreams come true.
Consider that a commission. It's fine. It sounds like that would be the kind of main ambition outside of continue to make music, right? Like, I mean, a little bit earlier you mentioned, like, you know, you've always got projects in mind. Is there anything else that's kind of bubbling under that you're interested in exploring? Yes
and no. I feel like right now, when I'm in like the touring mode that I'm in right now, it's like to survive that is sort of one track mindy. It's just about the performance and the travel and being present. And it's a really joyful time for me, because I write a lot when I'm on the road. So that's kind of its own little protective world for me, which will kind of dissipate as soon as I get back into like kind of more chill home life, a festival. And I think that's when my brain will start ticking off like the answer to those questions of what's next? Are we diving into this Broadway project? Is it going to be the next album right away? My feeling is that I really have a hunger in my belly to get back into the studio soon, only because that thing that doesn't happen to me all the time has been happening lately, where I'm waking up in the middle of the night with the urge to get something out and to write something down or to record it on my phone. And that's always a really exciting time to pay attention, because that's when the best stuff happens, when you're not trying and it's just kind of happening to you.
And you hinted earlier that maybe it's like you might experiment with doing something different in terms of just getting the music out there. That sort of suggests that maybe you'll be like, you want to be a bit more spontaneous with, like, if you have an idea, you want to kind of share it quicker, or?
I hope I can eventually become that way. I am definitely wanting to not take a 4-year break in between. I can say that for sure. But I am a lover of an album. I know it's old fashioned. I love versus the world of like just singles that we live in. I can embrace that to an extent, but I'm always going to want to have a body of work that just flows in a way that you can hold it in your hand, and it's a present someone gave you, and it's an offering of a whole bunch of stories of life. And I think I love how they work together, like the songs of an album. So I can't promise that I'm going to be one of those artists that has a song out every month because I care too much about the beauty of the project.
And also, you mentioned earlier when you're out on the road, like I know that sometimes you try and see a bit of the places where you go, like go and visit a local art gallery or museum, or go running or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like what are you looking forward to doing over the next few weeks whilst you're in Europe? Is there anything that you've identified as stuff that you want to do?
Well, I'm a real foodie. I'm rather food obsessed, and I'm not ashamed, but so we look, wherever we go, like I swear we'll be in the middle of eating lunch and I'll be talking about like, what are we going to do for dinner? They're like, guys, settle down, eat your pasta. No, I think that's one of the joys of traveling, is getting to try all of the restaurants on your list, all of the different kind of things. And we research ahead, like all of us kind of collectively, of where we want to go when we get to Tokyo, where do we want to go when we get to Paris, and then same for here. We had a great experience last night. I think in terms of tourist stuff, I've really learned the lesson. This has kind of been my first time touring so heavily as the headliner, and I've learned the lesson of just like how like health is wealth. Like you need to stay regimented, and that sounds kind of like a boring thing on my list, but like
just look after your voice. Basically, do you mean just your physical
stay
well-being?
Alive? Like you like eat well, exercise, get that sleep, because it is a grueling situation. And I don't think people can really understand until you've done a bus tour, and our show is energy packed. So I've so far had a record of never really having to miss one, and I want to keep that going. And then on top of it, I think, yeah, like you said, if we have days off, I'm going to do some shopping in Paris. I've got some friends to meet up with in a couple different spots. And that's the main goals.
What's your favorite moment in the set at the moment? In terms of like a song or a handful of songs that sit together, like where you just know, like I'm always just looking forward to that moment in the live set?
I mean, I really love actually the opening in a way. There's the band boys kind of take the stage by themselves and really kind of get the energy going, and there's this like dramatic walk I get to do up these stairs, and like there's like just this feeling, and every time I turn to my right and I lock eyes with my drummer, and he always just kind of like winks at me, or we have that knowing look like, are you ready to have fun? And it's real, and because we all are having fun. Like it is a joyful experience for my guitarist, for my bassist, for Sophie, my backup singer, and for Nick and Jared, and we just we really love each other. We've been touring together for a very long time, some of us like up to 10 years, and except for Sophie, she's just new this year. But because of that, I think we're kind of offering to the audience, like, we are all of us here. We're all going to be like a family tonight. Like, let go of your inhibitions and like, let's dance. The joy is when that works. And then I think the other answer is, I was really surprised by this, but my favorite song to perform live out of all of them is probably "Want You in My Room," which is one of those songs I was even scared to put on the album, because I'm like, it's a little come hither. Like, it's not like holding anything back. And yet it's like, yeah. So we'll see how this flies. And it's been really fun to see that, you know, the anytime that I'm afraid that I've gotten too weird or too quirky for someone to maybe digest it, I'm always amazed that that's like the song that ends up being celebrated the most. And maybe that's a good lesson to my.
I want you to watch out when you're playing "When I Needed You," to look out into the crowd and see the guy in the Slayer t-shirt rocking out. First night, you got to keep your eyes split. It's going to happen.
Okay.
Final question, I suppose, is just about that thing that we talked a bit about at the top of the podcast, which is just about how you seem to have this ability to be able to bring people of different varieties and, you know, backgrounds, everything together. Like, it's kind of like your music and your personality is a sort of unifier. And in that moment of like getting a room full of people from all different backgrounds and ages and gender and everything else, do you feel proud of effectively bringing people from those different backgrounds together?
This is going to be a complicated answer, but just as you were saying that, I was thinking, you know, in my childhood of living in two homes, with four parents who are all extremely different. I think the one thing that, and I switched every 2 days my whole life, so it was a lot of like, where am I now? But in a beautiful way, I think what I took away from that is just like they all looked at life differently. They all had their own really strong opinions, and there was something that I loved about each and every one of them. And when I was talking direct one-on-one, that person made the most sense, and vice versa. And I think that's something I've really taken away from when I left home, of just like every person that I've come across has their story, and once you get to know it, you will love them. When we put on these shows, I think like a secret mission statement in my own head is just like, let's make a room that is just full of that feeling of like acceptance for like whoever you are, whatever you believe, whatever you feel. Just like come here tonight and just like be that same way with everyone that you meet. And the greatest joy is when I look down at the audience and I see strangers who are just embracing each other like their family. Like, how cool to be in that room. And I'm, again, like I said, it's the gift of my life.
Anyway, good night.